Hey, Rembrandt, mop the canvas. Don't just stare at it. Ethan Thorne's Gucci sneaker slammed into Javi Rojas's lower back, the impact a wet, sickening thud that echoed through the cavernous space of Apex MMA. The 45-year-old former Green Beret went down hard, his body sprawling across the slick, sweat-drenched mats of the Miami gym. The industrial mop clattered from his grip as 24 of Miami's wealthiest tech bros and crypto millionaires watched in a stunned, awkward silence. Maybe if you spent less time daydreaming about your glory days and more time doing the job I pay you for, this place wouldn't be a damn cesspool. Ethan sneered, his voice dripping with the casual cruelty of a man who'd never known a single day of hardship. He stepped over Javi's prone form, as if he were nothing more than a discarded towel. Javi slowly, deliberately, pushed himself up. The grimy water from the mat soaked through the thin fabric of his gray janitor's uniform. His calloused, scarred hands trembled, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a rage so pure, so disciplined, and so deeply suppressed that it had its own gravitational pull. It was an ancient, sleeping predator, and Ethan Thorne had just kicked it awake. The students shuffled their feet, their smirks fading into discomfort. Chloe Davis, the gym manager, quickly looked down at her tablet, her face a mask of practiced indifference. But Javi's eyes, his eyes held the weight of 1,000 moonless nights in the Hindu Kush, the ghost of a dozen high-value targets, and the surgical knowledge of a man who could dismantle Ethan's entire world in less time than it takes to tie a shoe. Ethan, oblivious, kicked the bright yellow mop bucket. A wave of dirty water cascaded over Javi's worn-out work boots. There. Now you've got something real to clean up. Get to it. Have you ever been so thoroughly underestimated that people forget you're even human, let alone dangerous? Javi Rojas had mastered the art of being invisible. For 3 years, he'd been a ghost. Every single night at 10 p.m., after the last of the evening classes had finished their cool-down selfies, he would slip through the service entrance of Apex MMA. His janitorial cart, with its squeaking wheel and chemical-scarred shelves, was his only companion. He was part of the background, as unnoticed as the motivational posters featuring Ethan's airbrushed physique that plastered the walls. The gym itself was an 8,000-square-foot monument to narcissism, perched on prime South Beach real estate. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the glittering Miami skyline, a constant reminder of the world its members owned. The color scheme was a sterile mix of chrome and matte black. From the professional-grade octagon that served as the gym's centerpiece to the long, ominous rows of 100-pound heavy bags hanging like leather-clad corpses, everything in the building screamed new money and brutal exclusivity. Ethan Thorne, at just 32, was the king of this kingdom. He had founded Apex MMA with a 7-figure check from his real estate developer father and had built a formidable brand training Miami's elite. His Instagram was a carefully curated shrine to his own perceived alpha status. Highlight reels of him scoring flashy but technically flawed knockouts against paid sparring partners, shirtless poses on his yacht, and vapid motivational quotes about the grind and savage mentality. The man who had washed out of his first and only amateur fight had found his calling as the emperor of weekend warriors. But Ethan's empire was built on a foundation of lies, and its biggest secret was currently wiping down a dumbbell rack for $14 an hour. Javi moved through his nightly routine with the methodical precision of a man defusing a bomb. He emptied trash cans filled with designer water bottles and protein bar wrappers. He disinfected equipment, his mind a million miles away. The lobby monitors, which were supposed to be playing promotional loops, were often left on the security feed from the day's training sessions. And Javi watched. His dark, intelligent eyes absorbed every lazy jab, every telegraphed kick, every crucial mistake in defensive posture that Ethan's high-paying clients accepted as gospel from their charismatic guru. What Ethan didn't know, what no one knew, was that Javier Rojas had a Distinguished Service Cross and 2 bronze stars gathering dust in a footlocker in his cramped Little Havana apartment. 2 decades of service in the U.S. Army's most elite Special Forces unit, a master of half a dozen martial arts, an expert in everything from hand-to-hand combat to counter-terrorism. All that knowledge, all that lethal potential, was compressed into the quiet, unassuming man who pushed a mop to keep a roof over the head of his 16-year-old daughter, Isabella. That apartment was a world away from the glitz of Apex MMA, a 20-minute drive across the causeway. Isabella would be there now, her textbooks spread across their small kitchen table, a constant, beautiful reminder of why Javi swallowed his pride every single night. She'd stopped asking why her dad, a decorated war hero, took a night shift job that barely paid the bills. The mountain of medical debt from her mother's losing battle with cancer 5 years ago had taught her the brutal math of survival. Pops Mateo, the gym's old-school Cuban boxing coach, had started to see the cracks in Javi's facade. Pops had been in the fight game for 50 years. He'd forgotten more about fighting than Ethan Thorne would ever know. He saw things. The way Javi's posture would instinctively correct itself as he watched grappling drills from the corner of his eye. The way his hands, even when wiping down the mirrors, would unconsciously clench into a perfect, tight guard. Pops recognized the ghost of muscle memory, the phantom limb of a lifetime of training. He saw the warrior hiding in the janitor's uniform. Chloe Davis, the gym manager, knew a different side of the story. She kept a locked digital folder on her laptop, password protected and buried deep. It contained the formal harassment complaints from the 4 other minority staff members who had quit over the past 2 years, all citing Ethan's hostile and abusive behavior. But Javi needed this job. Isabella needed him to have this job. So he absorbed Ethan's daily microaggressions and overt humiliations like body shots in the 12th round, staying on his feet through sheer, unadulterated willpower. Ethan's star pupil was Chad Sterling, a 22-year-old trust fund kid whose father was a major investor in the gym. Chad had the raw athleticism of a college lacrosse player, but the defensive instincts of a stunned deer. It was a fatal flaw, one that Ethan consistently failed to correct because, fundamentally, his own technique was a house of cards built on flashy, ineffective movements. Every night, Javi watched in silent agony as Ethan taught these eager, wealthy young men the wrong way to slip a punch, the wrong way to defend a takedown, the wrong way to protect their necks in a choke. He was teaching them how to get hurt. A part of Javi, the sergeant major that still lived inside him, screamed to intervene, to correct the flawed footwork, to demonstrate the proper way to angle off after a combination. But the larger part, the pragmatic, desperate father, knew that stepping out of the shadows and challenging Ethan Thorne meant losing the one thing he and Isabella had left: stability. But late at night, in the quiet hours after 2 a.m., when the gym was his alone, a kingdom of shadows and echoes, Javi sometimes let the ghost out. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors wasn't a janitor anymore. It was the operator he used to be. A flurry of perfectly executed shadowboxing combinations would flow from him, a violent, beautiful poetry written in muscle and memory. A lightning-fast jab, a brutal cross, a devastating liver shot, all delivered to an opponent only he could see. Those were the moments when Javier Rojas remembered that he was a weapon, and Ethan Thorne had no goddamn idea he was playing with a loaded gun. Chad Sterling stumbled into Apex MMA at 7:15 p.m., trying to hide a blossoming black eye behind a pair of oversized sunglasses. The 22-year-old had lost his first amateur MMA fight that weekend in a spectacularly embarrassing fashion. He'd been submitted in 47 seconds by a fighter half his size, using a simple rear naked choke, the very same move that Ethan had been teaching him to defend for months. "It's not your fault, man," Ethan barked, his voice echoing in the suddenly quiet gym. He paced in front of the mirrors like a caged tiger, performing for the evening's clientele. "These guys from the inner city gyms, they fight dirty. There's no technique, no honor. It's just street brawling." Javi continued mopping near the free weights, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the handle. He had watched Ethan drill that same flawed defense with Chad 100 times. Chin up, arms spread wide to try and peel the opponent's hands away, leaving the neck exposed like a gilded invitation. It was suicide. "The problem is these thugs learn to fight in alleys," Ethan continued, his voice rising with theatrical indignation. "They don't respect the art form. They just swing for the fences and hope for a lucky shot. It's not real martial arts." Chad, desperate for an excuse, nodded miserably, swallowing every self-serving word. Javi's jaw was a block of granite. He moved his cart closer, feigning the need to clean around the heavy bags. "That's why pure technique will always beat brute force," Ethan announced, grabbing another student to demonstrate the exact same incorrect choke defense that had cost Chad the match. "See? You keep your chin high to create space, and you pull at the hands. It's about leverage." "No," Javi whispered. The word escaped him before his internal sensor could catch it. It was barely audible, but in the momentary silence, it sounded like a gunshot. Ethan froze, his arms still wrapped around the student's neck. "What did you just say?" The low hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. Javi felt 20 pairs of eyes lock onto him. Chad, the other students, Chloe Davis behind the front desk. He had just walked across a line he'd spent 3 years avoiding. He'd made himself visible. "Nothing, sir. My apologies," Javi mumbled, turning back to his mop. But Ethan smelled blood. He was a predator whose authority had just been questioned, and he couldn't let it go. No, please," Ethan said, his voice dripping with venomous sarcasm as he released the student. "The janitor has some wisdom to share. The floor-mopping sensei wants to teach technique now." He strode towards Javi, invading his personal space. "You think pushing a mop makes you an expert on choke defense, Rojas?" The other students began to circle, their phones starting to emerge from their pockets. This was better than a training session. This was drama. Chad looked mortified, caught in the middle. Chloe reached for the gym's landline, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. "I said, did you have something to add to my instruction?" Ethan demanded, his face inches from Javi's. Javi finally looked up. He didn't look at Ethan's eyes, but through them, with a calm, unnerving stillness that Ethan had never seen before. "You're teaching him wrong," Javi said, his voice quiet but clear. "That defense will get him seriously hurt." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Ethan's face went from tanned to crimson. He had just been publicly contradicted, not by another fighter, but by the help. In front of the very clients whose payments funded his lavish lifestyle. He had to crush this, annihilate it. "Wrong?" Ethan let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. 20 years in the fight game, and some janitor who cleans my toilets thinks he knows better. I know that tucking your chin is the first thing you learn and the last thing you forget," Javi said, his voice unwavering. The humiliation was now complete. His students were looking at him differently, a seed of doubt planted in their minds. Ethan had to regain control, immediately and permanently. "Fine," he snarled, a vicious idea forming. "You're the expert. Show us. Show the class your expert technique." He pointed a trembling finger at the nearest 150-pound heavy bag. "Demonstrate proper form for everyone." Javi shook his head. "Sir, I'm just here to clean." I'm not asking you, I'm ordering you. Demonstrate your brilliant technique, Ethan pressed, backing him into a corner. Unless, of course, you're admitting you're full of shit and don't have a clue what you're talking about. The trap was set. Refuse, and he looks like a coward and a fool. Comply, and he reveals the secret he has guarded for 3 years. Javi's eyes scanned the room. He saw Chad's confused, hopeful face. He saw Chloe's worried expression. He saw the gleam of a dozen smartphone cameras, all pointed at him. He took a slow breath, walked to the heavy bag, and let his mop fall to the floor. What happened next would become a legend at Apex MMA. Javi's first combination was not thrown, it was unleashed. It was a fluid, perfect sequence. A piston-like jab that snapped the air, a devastating cross that followed the exact same channel, and a left hook to the body that landed with a sickening thud. The 150-pound bag, which most students could barely move, jumped back 3 feet, its heavy chain groaning in protest. His footwork was a masterclass in efficiency, his form so flawless it looked like something from a textbook. A second combination followed before the bag had even settled. A right uppercut that nearly lifted it off its mounting, followed by a left head kick so fast and precise that several students actually flinched. Dead silence. Ethan Thorne's jaw hung open. Chad Sterling's eyes were wide with a sudden, dawning comprehension. This was not a janitor. This was what a real fighter looked like. This was the technique Ethan pretended to have. Javi stepped back from the bag instantly, a flicker of regret in his eyes. He had let the ghost out. The silence was broken by the sound of Ethan's ragged breathing. His face had morphed from red to a pale, blotchy purple. His public humiliation was now absolute and irrefutable. "Get your shit and get out," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying, primal rage. "Don't you ever disrespect me in my own gym again? You're fired." But they both knew it was too late. The damage was done. The students had seen something real, something authentic, and it was a truth that would haunt Ethan Thorne's nightmares. They had just witnessed proof that the man who cleaned their filth knew more about fighting than the man who took their money. Ethan Thorne spent the entire night bathed in the blue glow of his laptop, fueled by rage and a fifth of scotch. He cross-referenced every database he could get his hands on. By dawn, the fragments he pieced together formed a picture that made his blood run cold. Amateur boxing records under the name Javier Rojas from 25 years ago. Military service commendations, heavily redacted but mentioning proficiency in advanced combatives. A grainy newspaper clipping from a small Texas town, featuring a young, stone-faced Golden Gloves champion who was unmistakably his janitor. But fear quickly curdled into something uglier. Instead of backing down, Ethan's shattered ego doubled down on a campaign of total destruction. This wasn't about firing Javi anymore. This was about breaking him. Week 1 was a masterclass in systematic humiliation. Ethan rescinded the firing, telling Javi he'd let him work off his disrespect. He began scheduling emergency deep cleans during the busiest training hours, forcing Javi to navigate his mop and bucket around sweaty, moving bodies. Students would spar, their sweat and sometimes blood spattering on floors Javi had just cleaned. Ethan would stand over him, arms crossed, a smug smirk on his face, ensuring the maximum possible degradation. "Careful around the athletes, champ," Ethan would announce loudly, the word champ dripping with sarcastic poison. "Wouldn't want you to get in the way of people with actual potential." The term became Ethan's new favorite weapon, delivered with just enough emphasis to make everyone in the room uncomfortable, but not quite enough for Chloe to file a formal report. She watched from the front desk, her fingers typing silent, meticulous notes, she prayed she'd never have to use. Javi endured it all with the stoicism of a man who had survived far worse. Isabella needed new clothes for school. The rent was due. Pride was a luxury his bank account couldn't afford. He absorbed the humiliation, his face a neutral mask, his movements deliberate and calm. But quiet suffering wasn't enough for Ethan. He needed to re-establish his dominance in a way no one could question. Every morning, Ethan would arrive an hour early to inspect Javi's overnight work, finding imaginary flaws in perfectly sanitized surfaces. "There's a smudge on this mirror, Rojas," he'd declare, pointing at an invisible speck. "Do it again." Javi would silently re-clean the same surface, sometimes 2 or 3 times, as Ethan watched with a look of profound satisfaction. The degradation became a daily ritual, a performance for the benefit of the early morning members. Week 2 brought a new level of psychological warfare. Armed with the old newspaper clippings, Ethan began spinning a new narrative to his inner circle of trainers and favored students. "Did you know our janitor used to think he was a somebody?" Ethan announced during a group session, his voice loud enough for Javi, who was cleaning the octagon canvas, to hear every word. "Golden gloves or something. Pathetic, right? Look where all that talent got him. Mopping up my sweat." Chad Sterling looked down at his shoes, a flush of shame creeping up his neck. He'd been watching Javi ever since the heavy bag incident, seeing the subtle shifts in his weight, the perfect balance, the coiled potential. He knew Ethan was wrong. He knew he was witnessing something ugly, but he lacked the courage to speak up. Ethan's social media became a weapon. He started posting photos and videos of the gym, always making sure to frame Javi in the background, usually bent over a trash can or scrubbing a toilet. The captions were insidious. "At Apex, we know our roles," or "Humility is the first step to greatness. Some people are still on step 1. His sycophantic followers loved it, filling the comments with laughing emojis and cruel jokes about ambitious janitors. From Ethan's warped perspective, this wasn't just cruelty. It was brand management. His entire identity was built on being the apex predator of his own gym. Any challenge to that authority, especially from a man he considered his subordinate, was an existential threat that had to be brutally and publicly neutralized. The harassment became a constant, low-grade torture. Ethan would accidentally knock over a dumbbell rack into Javi's path. He'd schedule his loudest, most intense sparring sessions right next to the area Javi was assigned to clean. He began using Javi as a demonstration dummy. "See how a real fighter controls distance?" he'd say, shoving Javi backward while explaining a technique to a student. "Some people think watching from the sidelines makes them an expert." The students would offer weak, uncomfortable chuckles as Javi silently righted himself, his expression unreadable. Week 3 delivered the breaking point Ethan had been meticulously engineering. "Rojas, get over here. Hold pads for Chad," Ethan commanded during a crowded evening class. It wasn't a request. It was a public summons. Javi looked up from where he was organizing kettlebells. "Sir, I'm not a trainer. I'm not qualified for that." "You seemed pretty damn qualified last week when you were critiquing my coaching," Ethan shot back. "Hold the pads." A circle of 20 students formed, their phones already out. Javi reluctantly slipped on the focus mitts. They felt alien and familiar at the same time. Ethan instructed Chad to start with light combinations, but his eyes were locked on Javi. Gradually, he had Chad increase the power, testing Javi's ability to absorb the punishment. "See how I'm finding the angles?" Ethan coached, while Chad threw increasingly heavy shots into the pads Javi held. A real fighter adapts his power to the situation. Javi absorbed each impact, his forearms starting to ache. His face remained a stone mask, a testament to years of training to never show pain to an enemy. But Ethan wasn't finished. He began to call out combinations that would force Chad to miss the pads, his gloves glancing off Javi's forearms and shoulders. "Oops," Ethan would say with a fake wince. "Gotta have quicker reflexes, champ." Then came the calculated final blow. Ethan whispered something to Chad, who then threw a wild, looping right hand. Javi, expecting it to be another off-target shot, shifted to absorb it on his shoulder. But the punch landed squarely on his left bicep, where a knot of scar tissue marked an old shrapnel wound from his final tour in Afghanistan. An explosion of white-hot, electric pain shot down Javi's arm. He dropped the pads, his vision momentarily blurring. His right hand instinctively balled into a fist, a perfectly formed weapon, before he forced it to open, finger by agonizing finger. "That's right. Walk away," Ethan sneered as Javi staggered back, cradling his injured arm. "When things get tough, you always run. At least you finally know your place." But Ethan's masterpiece of cruelty came that weekend. The security footage of Javi's heavy bag demonstration, the one that had started it all, appeared on Ethan's Instagram. But this version was edited, slowed down, with clown music playing over it. The caption read, "When the help gets a little too ambitious. Stay in your lane towards your reality check, charging apexima." The video went viral. Within a day, it had tens of thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most of them ugly, racist, and precisely what Ethan had intended. "Stick to the mop, Pablo," read one. "Janitor thinks he's Canelo," laughed another. Isabella found the video on Sunday night. Javi found her in her bedroom, phone in her hand, silent tears streaming down her face as she read the digital mob's verdict on her father. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking with a pain that wounded Javi more than any punch ever could. "Why don't you do something? Why do you let him do this?" Javi looked at his daughter's heartbroken face and had no answer that wouldn't destroy the last of her innocence. Pops Mateo found Javi in the janitor's closet that Monday night, sitting on an overturned bucket amidst the bleach and ammonia, his head in his hands. "I saw the video, hijo," Pops said quietly. Javi didn't look up. "I need the job, Pops." "That man is not just trying to fire you. He is trying to erase you," Pops said, his voice grim. "If you do not fight back, there will be nothing left of you for him to fire." "I can't," Javi choked out. "Isabella, college applications are next year. She needs—" "He is firing you anyway," Pops interrupted, his words sharp and certain. "I heard him on the phone with his lawyer. He's looking for a legal way to terminate you without cause. He's already interviewing your replacement." Javi finally lifted his head. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Pops saw something other than weary resignation in his eyes. He saw the faint, dangerous flicker of a pilot light being reignited. The gym clock glowed 2:17 a.m. The last of the late-night staff had clocked out hours ago, leaving Javi alone in the silent, sprawling gym. He was alone with the ghosts of who he used to be and the ever-watchful security cameras that had become the primary witnesses to his systematic degradation. He abandoned his cleaning cart by the front desk and walked with purpose to the heavy bag, the one that had betrayed his secret. Hidden beneath a stack of industrial-sized paper towel rolls in his cart were his old hand wraps. They were faded gray, worn smooth by thousands of hours of training, the only tangible link to his former life he'd never had the heart to throw away. He wrapped his hands with the slow, deliberate ritual of a priest preparing for Mass. The first combination was a ghost, a whisper of muscle memory. The second was a conversation. The third was a statement. Jab, cross, hook to the body, spinning back fist. Each strike landed with the thunderous impact of a man venting 3 years of swallowed rage. The heavy bag bucked and swayed on its chain, a testament to the terrifying power Javi had kept leashed for so long. He was so lost in the violent rhythm that he didn't hear the gym's glass door swing open. Dios mío, Pops Mateo whispered from the entrance. He'd come back for his forgotten reading glasses and had stumbled upon a revelation. Javi spun around, his hands still raised in a defensive posture, his breathing heavy. He was caught. The two men stood frozen in the stark, fluorescent glare. How long? Pops asked, his voice filled with awe. Special Forces, 20 years, Javi said quietly, beginning to unwrap his hands. Combatives instructor at Fort Bragg for 8 of them. Boxing, Muay Thai, Krav Maga, long time. Pops shook his head slowly, a lifetime of fight knowledge allowing him to fully grasp the truth of what he had just witnessed. That fraud, Ethan, has been teaching these rich kids how to get hurt for 3 years. And you've been watching him do it. Every damn night, Javi admitted, the frustration finally bubbling to the surface. His footwork is a joke. He overextends on every punch, his defensive instincts. A kid in your Saturday morning class has better instincts, but I needed the job, Pops. Not anymore, you don't, Pops said, his expression hardening. I told you, I heard him. He's looking for a way to get rid of you. You are gone, whether you fight back or not. The words landed like a flurry of body blows. Javi's entire strategy of survival, enduring the humiliation, swallowing the pride, staying invisible, it had all been for nothing. He had sacrificed his dignity for a job that was already gone. There's more, Pops continued, stepping closer. The gym's investors are getting nervous. Too many members have quit, complaining about Ethan's attitude. Chloe has been documenting everything. They're building a case, but they're afraid to move on him. Javi slumped against the heavy bag, the fight draining out of him. Isabella's college fund. I'm almost there. Listen to me, Javi, Pops said, his voice low and intense. Ethan is planning something to finish you. I heard him talking about it. He's not just going to fire you. He's going to ruin your reputation so you can't get another job in this city. He's going to paint you as unstable, aggressive. The old coach paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. But what if we flip the script? What if, instead of being the victim he wants you to be, you become the man who exposes him for the coward he is? Javi looked up, and for the first time, he saw something in Pops's eyes that wasn't pity or sympathy. It was the profound respect of one true warrior for another. What are you talking about? A formal challenge? Un combate de hombres, Pops said, a fire lighting up his old eyes. Fighter to fighter. You call him out publicly. You demand he face you in his own octagon to settle this with honor, instead of hiding behind his money and his lawyers. Javi shook his head. He's a coward. He'll never agree to it. He will if you corner him, Pops insisted. Ethan's entire identity is built on being the baddest man in the room. If you challenge him in front of his students, his investors, his thousands of social media followers, his ego won't let him say no. He'll be forced to accept or be exposed as a fraud. Pops pulled out his phone and showed Javi Ethan's latest Instagram post, the mocking, edited video of Javi on the heavy bag. You challenge him here, in the comments, for everyone to see. Make it about honor, about dignity. Force his hand. Javi stared at the screen, at the hundreds of cruel comments from strangers. He saw his daughter's tear-streaked face in his mind's eye. He felt the phantom pain in his shoulder, the sting of the dirty mop water, the 1,000 tiny cuts of 3 years of humiliation. And what if I lose? Javi whispered. You will not lose, Pop said with absolute certainty. I've been in this game for 50 years. Ethan Thorne is a glorified fitness instructor with a good publicist. You, hijo, are a goddamn weapon of war who has been pretending to be a man. It is time to stop pretending. Slowly, deliberately, Javi took his phone from his pocket. His thumb hovered over the comment section. He felt the tectonic plates of his life shifting beneath his feet. The part of him that was a father hesitated. But the part of him that was a warrior, the part that Isabella needed to see, had already made the decision. The comment appeared on Ethan's viral video at 3:47 a.m., a digital gauntlet thrown down in the dead of night. It was simple, direct, and utterly devastating. You want to settle this? Stop hiding behind your keyboard. Face me in your octagon. No cameras, no audience, just you and me. Winner walks away with his dignity. Loser leaves Apex forever, unless, of course, you're afraid to fight a man who might actually fight back. Javier Rojas. By sunrise, the comment had gone nuclear. It had thousands of likes and hundreds of replies. Ethan's followers were tagging him relentlessly, demanding a response. The sharks could smell blood in the water. His carefully crafted image as the gym's apex predator was being publicly dismantled, and every minute of his silence was another nail in its coffin. Ethan arrived at Apex MMA that afternoon to a gym buzzing not with the sounds of training, but with hushed, excited whispers. The challenge had escaped the confines of Instagram. Local MMA blogs had picked up the story. Amateur fighters across Florida were debating the matchup. "Are you seriously going to fight the janitor?" Chad Sterling asked, his voice a mix of awe and concern. Ethan, cornered by his own manufactured persona, had no choice. Backing down would mean total social and professional suicide. But winning would be the ultimate display of dominance. It would solidify his legend. "Friday night," Ethan announced to the crowded gym, forcing a confident smirk. "After hours. Since Mr. Rojas is so eager to embarrass himself, I'll be happy to provide the stage." Word spread like a contagion. By Wednesday, Chloe was fielding dozens of calls from people wanting to watch. What started as a private challenge had become the most anticipated underground event in the Miami fight scene. Ethan, seeing a marketing opportunity, leaned into it. He announced he would allow a limited number of members to watch, and that he would live-stream the event on his Instagram. This wasn't about honor anymore. It was about clicks. His Instagram stories became a highlight reel of his fight camp, featuring intense workout montages set to aggressive rap music. The captions read, "Prepping to take out the trash," and "Time to teach a lesson in humility." Javi trained in the shadows. Pops would open his small, gritty boxing gym in Little Havana at 5 a.m. for secret sessions. The old coach watched in silent amazement as the years of dormancy sloughed off Javi, revealing the elite warrior beneath. His timing was supernatural, his power was terrifying, and his fight IQ was off the charts. Friday night arrived, and Apex MMA felt less like a gym and more like a modern-day coliseum. Over 200 people packed the facility, their phones held aloft like digital torches. The Instagram live stream, broadcasting to thousands more, was already running. Ethan played to the crowd, shadowboxing in the center of the octagon, trash-talking to his online audience. He was performing the role of the confident champion. Javi entered through the back service door, the same way he always did. He wore simple, unbranded black shorts and had his hands wrapped in old gray tape. No entourage, no music, no performance. He was just a man there to do a job. The atmosphere was electric. Pops stood in Javi's corner, whispering final words of calm advice. Ethan had Chad Sterling in his. Chloe Davis, looking deeply uncomfortable, served as the reluctant referee. 3 5-minute rounds, she announced, her voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. Fight. Ethan charged forward instantly, throwing a wild, looping haymaker. He wanted a spectacular one-punch knockout for his highlight reel. But Javi wasn't there. The punch sliced through empty air as Javi took a small, almost imperceptible step to his right. A second wild swing from Ethan met the same fate. For the entire first round, Javi put on a masterclass in defensive movement. He slipped, he parried, he ducked, making Ethan look clumsy and amateurish. He made a world-class athlete, a man in peak physical condition, look like a drunk trying to swat a fly. He threw only 3 punches in the entire round, 3 stinging, precise jabs that snapped Ethan's head back and served as a chilling reminder of the gulf in their skills. Ethan returned to his corner, gasping for air, his face a mask of frustration and growing panic. "Why won't he fight me?" he wheezed to Chad. "I think he is," Chad replied quietly, finally understanding. Round 2 began, and the lesson continued. Javi began to open up, but not with brutal force. He was a surgeon, dismantling Ethan piece by piece. A perfect jab-cross combination that bloodied Ethan's nose. A thudding hook to the liver that made him audibly grunt and double over. A clean uppercut that sent his custom-made mouthguard skittering across the canvas. The crowd, which had initially been chanting Ethan's name, was now watching in stunned, silent awe. "This is not a fight," Pops murmured into Javi's ear between rounds. "This is an execution." Round 3 was a formality. Ethan, now desperate and exhausted, charged forward with a telegraphed right cross, putting every ounce of his remaining strength into the punch. Javi saw it coming from a mile away. He didn't back up, he stepped into it. As Ethan's punch flew past his ear, Javi pivoted on his left foot, rotating his hips and unleashing a short, perfectly timed left hook. It wasn't a wild swing. It was a marvel of biomechanics, a precise delivery of kinetic energy. The sound of the impact was sharp and final, like a dry branch snapping. Ethan's eyes rolled back in his head. His body went completely rigid for a moment, and then he crumpled to the canvas, unconscious before he even hit the mat. The gym fell utterly silent. The thousands watching on the live stream saw it all. Javi immediately took a knee beside his fallen opponent, checking his pulse and positioning him in the recovery position with the practiced calm of a combat medic. When Ethan's eyes fluttered open 30 seconds later, blinking in confusion at the ceiling lights, Javi helped him sit up. "You okay?" he asked, his voice devoid of triumph, only genuine concern. Ethan could only nod weakly, his pride shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The crowd, after a moment of shocked silence, erupted. The sound was deafening. Within minutes, the knockout clip was everywhere. Janitor Justice began trending on Twitter. Professional fighters and trainers began sharing the video, breaking down the beauty of Javi's technique, his incredible restraint, and the perfection of the final punch. Ethan Thorne's reputation wasn't just damaged, it was vaporized in the 10 seconds it took for Javi's hook to land. But as Javi helped his former tormentor to his feet, demonstrating a level of class and sportsmanship Ethan had never been capable of, neither man could have imagined that the knockout was not the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. Ethan Thorne woke up Saturday morning to the deafening silence of a world that had turned on him. His phone was a vessel of digital poison. The knockout video, now remixed and memified, was inescapable. Janitor Justice wasn't just trending, it was a global phenomenon. Respected MMA analysts were praising Javi's surgical precision and veteran composure, while simultaneously dissecting Ethan's telegraphed, amateurish technique. But humiliation, for a narcissist like Ethan, is a catalyst for vengeance. His first call wasn't to his family or a doctor, it was to Richard Kellerman, a notoriously ruthless attorney whose specialty was weaponizing the legal system. "I want him destroyed," Ethan hissed into the phone, his jaw aching with a pain that was secondary to his wounded pride. "I'm filing assault charges. We're going to bury him." By Monday morning, the narrative war had begun. Ethan Thorne, the defeated bully, was masterfully repackaged as Ethan Thorne, the innocent victim. Kellerman crafted a story of a benevolent employer ambushed by an unstable employee during what Ethan now claimed was a light supervised sparring session meant to help an employee with anger issues. "My client is a pillar of the community who was trying to help a troubled man," Kellerman announced to a local news crew, his face a mask of solemn concern. Mr. Rojas, a man with a documented history of advanced combat training that he deliberately concealed, responded to this act of kindness with a level of violence that could have been lethal. This was a premeditated, cowardly assault. The arrest happened at dawn on Tuesday. Isabella watched in horror from their kitchen window as 2 police cars pulled up to their small apartment building. She saw them lead her father away in handcuffs, his face calm and resigned, as neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. Ethan's media campaign was a blitzkrieg of calculated deceit. He appeared on morning talk shows, a subtle bandage on his jaw, speaking in a soft, traumatized voice about his fear of further violence. "I gave Javier a chance when no one else would," he told a sympathetic news anchor, a single tear glistening in his eye. "I tried to be a mentor, and he repaid me by sucker punching me, by trying to end my career, maybe even my life." The video evidence was selectively edited. Kellerman's legal team released a version that showed only Javi's brutal knockout punch, conveniently omitting the preceding rounds of one-sided domination and, more importantly, the 3 years of documented harassment that had led to the fight. The social media algorithms, fed by Ethan's ad budget, did the rest, pushing his version of the story to millions. Public opinion, once so firmly on Javi's side, began to fracture. Facebook mom groups and neighborhood watch pages filled with comments about unhinged employees and the dangers of hiring violent individuals. The heroic Janitor Justice hashtag was soon competing with a toxic tide of justice for Ethan posts, demanding Javi be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Javi's court-appointed public defender was a young, overworked lawyer named Anita Desai. During their first brief meeting in a sterile courthouse basement room, she laid out the grim reality. "Mr. Rojas, they're not playing around. They're pursuing felony assault charges with a workplace violence enhancement," she explained, her voice heavy with fatigue. "Mr. Thorne's medical team is claiming he suffered a severe concussion with ongoing neurological symptoms. His lawyer is preparing a civil suit for lost income and emotional distress that could run into the millions." Isabella sat on a hard plastic bench in the courthouse hallway during her father's arraignment, forced to watch as Ethan gave another soul-crushing performance for the cameras on the courthouse steps. His supposed brain injury didn't seem to prevent him from eloquently describing his long and painful road to recovery. The legal machinery ground forward with terrifying speed. Kellerman filed a motion to have the full, unedited fight video suppressed, arguing it was prejudicial, and didn't change the fact that a trained professional had violently assaulted an amateur. He subpoenaed character witnesses who painted Ethan as a generous community leader and Javi as a quiet, brooding loner with a hidden capacity for violence. Chloe Davis and Pops Mateo found themselves in an impossible position. They held the keys to Javi's defense. Chloe's meticulous records of Ethan's abuse and Pops's cell phone, which contained secretly recorded audio of several of Ethan's most vile, racist tirades against Javi. But Apex MMA's primary investor, Chad Sterling's father, made it clear that testifying against Ethan would mean immediate termination and professional blacklisting. Meanwhile, Ethan's victimhood was proving profitable. His GoFundMe for medical expenses and recovery soared past $75,000 in a matter of days, fueled by donations from people who saw him as a symbol of employers under threat. The turning point came not from a lawyer, but from a heartbroken, furious 16-year-old girl. Isabella, watching her father be systematically crucified in the court of public opinion, created a TikTok account under the handle The Janitor's Daughter. Her first video was raw, unedited, and filmed on her phone in her bedroom. "My dad, Javier Rojas, is not a monster," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. The video would eventually be seen by 5 million people. "He's a hero who served this country for 20 years. He took a job cleaning toilets to pay for my mom's medical bills before she died. Ethan Thorne didn't try to mentor him. He tortured him every single day, and nobody did anything to stop it. Isabella's videos were a counter-narrative of pure truth. She showed his military medals, old photos of him coaching youth boxing, and tearfully read the hateful comments from Ethan's viral video. She humanized the man the media was trying to demonize. But in the courtroom, Kellerman's strategy was brutally effective. The prosecution painted Javi as a ticking time bomb, a trained killer who had deceived his employer. They argued that his special forces background legally obligated him to a higher standard of restraint, regardless of any alleged provocation. Javier Rojas is not the victim here, the prosecutor argued in a pre-trial hearing. He is a man with a lethal skill set who chose to use disproportionate, potentially deadly force in a workplace dispute. The preliminary hearing was a circus. Ethan's supporters, many in custom-printed "Chuanchuk Justice for Ethan" t-shirts, packed one side of the courtroom. Javi's supporters, mobilized by Isabella's TikTok campaign, filled the other. Pops sat in the back row, his hand resting on the phone in his pocket, the audio recordings a silent weight on his conscience. He watched Javi, a good, honorable man, facing the possibility of 5 years in prison for defending his own dignity. He realized that some things were more important than a paycheck. That night, Pops uploaded 17 minutes of unedited audio to a private YouTube link. It was a damning compilation of Ethan's voice, using racial slurs, threatening Javi's job, and explicitly telling another trainer his plan to break that spick down until he does something stupid. He sent the link to Isabella with a simple message. The world needs to hear the truth. Within hours, the audio was everywhere. Justice for Marcus resurged with the force of a hurricane. The context was now undeniable. But Ethan Thorne, backed into a corner, his reputation in tatters, and his legal case imploding, was about to play his last, most dangerous card. He was going to put Javi on the stand and try to tear him apart himself. The Maricopa County Courthouse was a powder keg on the first day of Javier Rojas's trial. Media trucks formed a perimeter around the building. Protesters from both sides chanted behind barricades. Inside, Ethan Thorne sat at the prosecution's table, a shadow of his former self. His social media empire had crumbled, his gym's membership had cratered, and the sponsors had vanished. All he had left was this trial. Richard Kellerman, however, remained unnervingly confident. The audio was damaging, but it wasn't legally ironclad. Their entire case rested on a single, powerful argument. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Kellerman began, his voice smooth and commanding. "This case is not about mean words or workplace disagreements. This case is about the rule of law. It is about a highly trained, elite combat specialist using force that could have easily been lethal against a man who posed no credible threat to him." He painted Ethan as a flawed, but ultimately well-intentioned man whose life had been ruined. He painted Javi as a dangerous deceiver. "The law is clear," Kellerman thundered. "A man with the training of a Green Beret has a greater responsibility to show restraint. He chose not to. He chose violence." Anita Desai, Javi's public defender, was no longer just a public defender. Inspired by Isabella's campaign, a high-profile civil rights law firm had joined her team pro bono, giving her the resources to fight back. Ethan's testimony was a piece of high theater. He wore a discreet neck brace, claiming lingering vertigo from the concussion. He spoke in soft, measured tones about his fear and trauma. "I thought he was going to kill me," Ethan said, his voice cracking on cue. "1 second, we were having a friendly athletic contest, and the next I woke up on the floor. I still have flashbacks." The cross-examination was Anita Desai's moment. She played the audio recordings Pops had provided. "Mr. Thorne, that is your voice, is it not? On March 15th, you stated, and I quote, 'I'm going to break that spick down until he quits or does something stupid.' Do you recall saying that?" Ethan's composure frayed. I may have used some intemperate language." "Intemperate language?" Desai pressed. Mr. Thorne, is calling a decorated veteran of Puerto Rican descent a spitz and a boy on 17 separate documented occasions simply intemperate language? Ethan's face flushed a deep, ugly red. I never meant anything racial by it. You posted a video mocking him to tens of thousands of people, didn't you? I was making a point about humility, Ethan shot back, his voice rising. The courtroom was silent. He had just admitted his motive to the jury. Chloe Davis's testimony was quiet but devastating, her meticulous notes painting a clear picture of a calculated campaign of abuse. Pops Mateo's testimony was the nail in the coffin. The respected 50-year veteran of the fight game looked the jury in the eye. In my professional opinion, he stated firmly, Ethan Thorne provoked, intimidated, and systematically abused Javier Rojas for 3 years. The fight in that octagon was not an assault. It was the inevitable result of a coward pushing a good man too far. But the trial's climax came when Javi himself took the stand. Calmly and with profound dignity, he recounted the years of daily humiliations. He spoke not of his own pain, but of his daughter. I let him call me boy because Isabella needed new sneakers, Javi said, his voice steady. I cleaned up the water he kicked over because Isabella needed money for the school lunch program. I took his abuse every single day because my daughter, who already lost her mother, needed a father who could provide for her. That is why I did not fight back. Ethan Thorne could not take it. He watched as the jury looked at Javi, not as a monster, but as a father. The man who had built his entire identity on dominance was being undone by a quiet man's display of true strength. That's a crock of bullshit, Ethan exploded, leaping to his feet. You loved it. You loved showing off, playing the secret badass. You wanted to humiliate me. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel, but Ethan was beyond reason. His mask of victimhood shattered. I gave you a job. I tried to help you, and you repaid me by trying to kill me. You people are all the same, always looking for a handout, always thinking you're owed something. The racist tirade hung in the air, an irreversible confession. Kellerman buried his face in his hands. Ethan Thorne had just convicted himself with his own hate-filled mouth. The jury was out for 47 minutes. When the foreman stood, he didn't even look at the prosecution's table. On the charge of felony assault, we the jury find the defendant, Javier Rojas, not guilty. A sob broke from Isabella as the courtroom erupted in cheers. Ethan Stone looked as if he'd been physically struck, his face ashen, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, she announced, her voice ringing with authority, this court finds that Mr. Thorne's lawsuit was frivolous and malicious. He is ordered to pay Mr. Rojas $150,000 to cover all legal fees and compensatory damages for emotional distress. The fallout was swift and total. The State Athletic Commission permanently revoked Ethan's training license. Apex MMA, now a toxic brand, declared bankruptcy within a month. The civil lawsuits from other former employees, using Pops's audio as evidence, piled up, costing Ethan every penny his father had ever given him. Job offers poured in for Javi. Elite training facilities offered him 6-figure salaries. He turned them all down. 6 months later, with the settlement money and funds raised from a new GoFundMe started by Isabella, Javi opened The Crucible, a non-profit community combat sports academy in the heart of Little Havana. The mission was simple. Teach self-defense to those who need it most on a pay-what-you-can basis. True strength isn't about dominating others, Javi told a local reporter at the grand opening. It's about having the strength to protect them. The academy taught boxing, jiu-jitsu, and what Javi called the code, a curriculum based on conflict de-escalation, emotional discipline, and warrior ethics. His daughter, now a freshman at the University of Florida on a full scholarship, managed the academy's social media, where her father's lessons on technique and character regularly went viral. Pops Mateo was his head coach. Chad Sterling, Ethan's former star pupil, was his first enrolled student. Ethan Thorne's downfall became a footnote, a cautionary tale about a man destroyed by his own ego. The last anyone heard, he was working as a personal trainer at a budget gym in rural Nevada. His kingdom of chrome and mirrors replaced by cracked linoleum and rust-flecked weights. His greatest punishment was not the loss of his money, but the forced anonymity. He had to wake up every day simply being himself, with no audience to applaud him. 1 year after the knockout that changed the world, Javier Rojas stood in the center of his own gym, wrapping the hands of a shy 12-year-old girl who was being bullied at school. The Crucible was more than a gym. It was a sanctuary, a movement. It was proof that true warriors don't break people down. They build them up. He had lost a job, but he had found his purpose. He had been a ghost for 3 years, but now, finally, everyone could see him. If this story meant something to you, prove it. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you underestimate the most. Because true warriors don't create victims. They create other warriors. And some victories are worth waiting 20 years to win.